Welcome back to the channel, guys, in the next part of Mega March. This video is a year overdue, originally slated to come out right after my video on Mega Man X. The original plan for Mega March, and still is to an extent, was to cover a game from each Mega Man series. So naturally, after covering Mega Man X and its remake, Maverick Hunter X, the logical step was to revisit the game that started everything, the original classic Mega Man. But some personal things going on around that time killed my enthusiasm for the project. And while I did get the footage I needed, my script felt underwhelming. I just couldn't find enough to discuss, and reading the script, it feels like a very by-the-numbers review, with not much of my own input being added. So I ended up just giving up on it. The whole thing just made me take a break from creating bigger videos, and instead just do some Let's Plays for months before I found my drive to make regular content again. But now I'm ready to try again, ready to talk about Mega Man and its remake, Powered Up. But before we get into it, you know the drill. Like the video, comment, and if you're new, hit that subscribe button. So let me start by stating that Mega Man isn't the hardest game I've played. Not even remotely close. Hell, it's probably not even the hardest Mega Man game I've played. But I'd be lying if my dumbass didn't walk into playing the first game cocky as fuck. Now, I was born in 1990, so I ended up missing a good chunk of the original Mega Man releases, with the first game I played of the OG Blue Bomber being Mega Man 8 on PS1.
Mega Man, today we finish this!
Hey, Zap! Why must I fight you? We are not enemies!
Shut up!
Man, I'll never get over how hilariously bad the voice acting is in this game. Once I had a computer and discovered ROMs and emulation, I would eventually play Mega Man 7. And finally, years later when the Mega Man Anniversary Collection was released, I played the remaining games. I had fun with the series, even if it didn't really measure up to X or Legends in my eyes. But I understood the difference between it and the X series. No wall jumping, no sub-tanks, and no armor. It was certainly harder than X, but I didn't really consider it punishing either. So when I decided to cover the original Mega Man game for my channel, I really didn't understand how out of my depth I was. Cause good God, this game is frustrating as hell. So let's get the obvious stuff out of the way. The game is a basic NES side-scrolling action platformer. And there isn't much of a story outside of the game's manual. Dr. Light and Dr. Wily built 6 robots to accomplish various tasks, along with 2 helper robots known as Rock and Roll. Rock being Mega Man's original Japanese name, pretty much existing just to make the music pun. I'm sure Keiji Inafune would never reuse an idea like that again. Dr. Wily betrays Dr. Light and turns the robots evil with plans to take over the world. Rock would then volunteer to become a super fighting robot to stop Dr. Wily, becoming stronger and changing his name to Mega Man. It's up to the original Blue Bomber to take down these evil robots, or Robot Masters, and then stop Dr. Wily. Despite the formula the rest of the classic series and some of its sequel series would follow, the original Mega Man is very different than what would follow. The first and obvious difference is that this game would only have you face 6 Robot Masters as opposed to 8 that would become standard. Though I guess you can make the argument that Mega Man and Roll would count as the other 2 Robot Masters in the original batch. Next is just how bare bones Mega Man's base moveset is here. There's no sliding, no charge shot, and no rush upgrades. So it plays a lot slower compared to newer games, especially since enemies can soak up quite a few buster shots. You also have a score meter, which is a bit annoying, not because you need to get a certain score for a level or anything, but because most item drops will increase your high score as opposed to something useful, like a heal or an extra life. Another difference is that the game throws you right into choosing which Robot Masters to fight. Pretty much every Mega Man game after this one would have an introduction or tutorial level that would get you familiar with the controls and gameplay. Not this one though, and due to the various difficulties of stages, you can end up getting a very bad impression of the game if you choose the harder stages first. And that's where most of the difficulty comes from, the stage design. Enemy placement, platform placement, and the slipperiness of Mega Man's movement makes precise platforming tricky. Gutsman's stage probably being the most infamous thanks to these stupid little platforms that can drop Mega Man. Extra lives are hard to come by, and rather annoyingly, there was no way to save in between stages. Not even a password system. You had to beat the entire game in one run. At least in the original version of the game, as the Legacy Collection added save states and rewinding to make things tolerable. Which you better believe I made use of. I'm not here to pretend I'm some super epic gamer who eats lightning and craps thunder. If a game adds quality of life improvements to make things more approachable, I'm all for it. The design of the stages leave a lot to be desired if I'm being honest. Not so much their layout, but just their general look. Bombman's level, for example, just comes off as a generic sci-fi level. Ditto for Cutman's level, which also looks kind of bland and uninspired, with very boring colors. I know it's the NES, so there are some limitations to design and color, but future games would do a lot better at tying a theme to a stage. Even in this game, Gutsman and Iceman stages stood out, portraying a construction site and an Arctic stage quite well. Bosses themselves aren't too bad, especially if you're using their weaknesses on them. The only exception, of course, being the oh-so-iconic Yellow Devil. When you first face him in Wily's tower, he's not even in the room yet. Pieces of him slowly entering the screen and forming his main body, which requires you to dodge his pieces before you can attack his main body. Unfortunately, the window for attack is tiny, so you only really get one shot to hit before he separates his pieces again. He's a massive spike in difficulty, even if you're using his weakness, hitting much harder than other bosses and showing up at the end of a rather hard stage. I have a lot of respect for anyone who manages to beat him without using the pause glitch or rewinding. After taking out the Yellow Behemoth, you'll continue to fight through Wily's tower, taking out his various original creations, along with refighting the Robot Masters. Though the Robot Masters are peppered out throughout the remaining levels as opposed to having a teleporter room to fight them in whatever order you want, like you would in future games. And once you make it to the Good Doctor, he'll fight you in his Wily machines. Destroy his toys and Dr. Wily begs for forgiveness, renouncing his evil ways. Never to trouble Mega Man and the forces of good, ever again. The original Mega Man isn't a bad game, but man, it feels really dated. It did some things that were novel for its time. First was giving the player the option to tackle the stages in any order they like. While I complained a bit about that making it difficult, it also keeps the replays of the game from feeling repetitive. Being able to take bosses' abilities was also pretty cool, as abilities in other games usually came from power-ups you found in a level, and depending on the game, there was the possibility you could drop your power-up soon after getting it, which isn't the case here. But that's really the only positives I've got. Like I mentioned earlier, I find most of the looks of the stages to be very bland and unappealing. The music is very forgettable too compared to what would come later, though I do like the boss and Yellow Devil themes. And probably its biggest issue, the fact you can't progress Wily's fortress without the magnet beam. It's hidden away in a Lekman stage. You can only get to it by using the Super Arm or Thunder Beam, and its function is to create platforms for moving around. But nothing in the game tells you that you'll need it, so if you didn't know about it beforehand, you'll have no clue how to proceed with the game. Yeah, nowadays you just look it up, but man do I feel bad for kids back in the 80s. I don't even think Nintendo Power was out yet. Even more so since they couldn't use passwords or save the game, so one screw up and you're starting right from the beginning again. I think the original game's problem is really that it's just completely overshadowed by every other game that came out after, especially Mega Man 2. 2 would make the platforming smoother, introduce the standard 8 bosses, have more creative level design, and of course, much better music. Along with letting you change the difficulty and the ability to carry E-tanks to soften the challenge a bit. And of course, a password system to save your progress. And as the series continued, they'd expand Mega Man's abilities by introducing the slide for moving around, and the charge shot for more damage. So to sum up my thoughts, Mega Man was interesting for its day, but its dated design and its difficulty make it so I can't really recommend the first game at all. Maybe as something to try after you've played the rest of the series, but definitely not the first thing you should play. I can't help but think that Capcom felt the same way, as like its younger brother, the original Mega Man would get a full-on remake. Well, more like a reboot really.
Mega Man, powered up!
Aww, isn't he adorbs? Just like how Capcom rebooted X into the slightly more mature Maverick Hunter X, They reboot the original Blue Bomber to be more cutesy and cartoon-like, in Mega Man Powered Up. To mixed reactions. I absolutely love this style, with everyone being more childlike and chibi. I never looked at Mega Man as being this mature or masculine character, at least not the original Mega Man. Hell, his official art always made him look younger and cartoony anyway. Not outright cutesy, but still he wasn't anything like the over-the-top US box art. I remember a lot of fans hating Powered Up, accusing Capcom of ruining the Blue Bomber forever. The fact that it was on the PSP, the so-called cooler and more mature handheld compared to the DS, probably didn't help matters. But it never bothered me. I'm someone who plays cutesy RPGs and adores characters like Kirby, so I wasn't insecure about my masculinity if I was out playing it in public. I'd say a big part of it was to differentiate it from Maverick Hunter X. Since both games released so close to each other, they probably didn't want them to cannibalize each other's sales by looking too similar. When starting a fresh file, you'll have the option to play the new revamped Powered Up levels, or the original Mega Man levels with the new graphical style. Powered Up keeps the same beats of the original game, with Wily stealing Dr. Light's robots and reprogramming them for evil. I also think it's a nice touch that when you face a boss in battle, they still have Dr. Light's symbol and not Dr. Wily's. We get an actual intro stage here, briefly being able to play as Mega before he volunteers to become a fighting robot, upgrading to Mega Man. From there, it's the same challenge the Robot Masters and defeat Dr. Wily plot, but with a few tweaks. The obvious one is that we have two new Robot Masters, Time Man and Oil Man. Because of their additions, the boss's weaknesses have been changed as well, switching the usual rotation of fights. But what's really amazing about this game, and honestly makes it superior to the original in every single way, is everything that got added into it. Besides the choice of playing the new or old levels, you also have the option to change the difficulty, making them easier by making bosses have less health or do less damage, or making it much harder for yourself if you want. Next, you have the option of changing Mega Man's base moveset. While he starts with just the Mega Buster like he did in the original, you're eventually able to unlock the option to use the Slide, Charge Shot, or just regular Mega. Needless to say, this also affects the difficulty, as you can just steamroll your way through everyone if you're using the Charge Shot, or creating a punishing experience, as regular Mega only has a close range kick attack and can't use boss abilities. The cutesy and chibi looks for the characters are also paired with full voice acting now.
Professor, please, change me into a fighting robot.
Mega? What are you saying, my child?
Mega Man, Roll, Dr. Light, Dr. Wily, and all the Robot Masters are voiced now, bringing a ton of personality to the characters. Mega Man is heroic and kind-hearted, often trying to de-escalate fights with his brother robots. Dr. Wily is an over-the-top evil scientist, channeling Dr. Cortex and his goofiness. But the Robot Masters are probably the real standouts. Each one has a little quirk or defect after being reprogrammed by Wily. For example, Cutman is convinced that Dr. Wily is good and Mega Man is evil. Iceman is suffering from a split personality, talking to himself as both a stern commander and a meek soldier. Bomb Man is obsessed with blowing up things. Okay, it's not much, but it keeps the bosses from being boring and generic compared to their silent originals. On the topic of the Robot Masters, you can now play as them too. In order to unlock them, you have to beat the Robot Masters only using your Mega Buster, which is easier said than done considering most Robot Masters can be a nightmare without their weakness, especially since they all have a stronger desperation move they can use in battle. Also, you can't be cheeky and use the Charge Shot to beat them either, so that doesn't count. But if you manage it, the Robot Masters won't be destroyed, and will instead be reprogrammed by Dr. Light to be good again. Their moveset makes them pretty fun to play, even if the stages are mostly the same. And they change up the dialogue a bit for certain encounters to take into account you're not playing as Mega Man. On top of the Robot Masters, you can also unlock Mega Man's red brother, Proto Man. His Buster is an instant charge shot, and he carries the iconic shield that can protect him from projectiles. So naturally, he's super easy mode, as absolutely nothing stands a chance against him. Though you do have to beat the 100 challenges in order to unlock him, which is easier said than done. Or you could just download him off the net. And finally, you can play as Mega Man's little sister, Roll. She fights with a broom that has a decent amount of range, and she gets a cute assortment of costumes she can use. Besides playing the game with all the unlockable characters, They all have their own challenges associated with them too. The challenges boil down to using specific abilities in creative ways, like trying to get through a stage to a checkpoint, or collecting points without dying. With increasing difficulty, some of these are so tough, I wonder if Capcom forgot this was still a kid's game. Seriously, it's insane, and the margin of error is tiny. There's also some boss rushes thrown in for some extra fun, with different rule sets applied, either playing it in classic mode, the new powered up mode, or being only able to use certain abilities. And finally, the biggest addition, and one I can't believe Capcom never followed up on, is construction mode. As you're playing the game, you'll find these random parts scattered around stages. These are used to design and build your own Mega Man levels, and to share them online. If that sounds familiar, yeah, this is basically Mario Maker, 9 years before it came out, which is absolutely insane. I remember when I played the game back on the PSP, I would screw around making levels or downloading super tough ones that people had shared online. It's a bit more basic compared to Mario Maker, probably due to memory limitations back on the PSP. It only let you use certain construction packs and enemies, but it was still pretty creative and added even more replay value to the game. While I'm not 100% sure if you can still download stages, since I'm playing this on an emulator, I remember Capcom released special stages based off of other games like Ghosts and Goblins. So even they were adding more and more to this game and supporting it pretty decently. To sum up my thoughts, Mega Man Powered Up is the right way to remake a game. It modernized the game in a way that brought it more in line with its more recent games, but also letting new players experience the old way the game was played, if they wanted to. The difficulty options and quality of life improvements allowed players to enjoy the game without being overwhelmed, while also allowing veteran players to challenge themselves even more. All the playable characters combined with their individual challenges gave you even more to do after beating the story. And Construction Mode offered infinite capabilities for creativity, something that apparently Capcom would have revisited in the cancelled Mega Man Universe game. While the graphics and more cutesy appearance may turn off some, it's their loss because they're missing out on one of the best Mega Man games ever. I easily recommend playing this one over the original. The only real negative I can even say about it being that, like Maverick Hunter X, it's unfortunately stuck on the PSP and Vita. Come on Capcom, you assholes. If you won't do a Legends collection, bundle these two together and bump them up to HD. I'll even pay $60 for them. Only if they're both on the disc or cartridge though. Both of these games are tiny. You can't pull that half of its digital garbage. While it looks like the powered up style is dead and buried now that Mega Man 11 has found its own modern 3D art style, even if the game never gets a port, maybe Capcom can take some lessons from this game and bring things like Construction Mode back. One can only hope. And that's the video. Thanks for watching, guys. Feels so good to finally get this one done. It's funny to think a game like Mega Man 1 was partially responsible for me taking a hiatus from my regular content. The fact I could get it done this time and actually had fun revisiting these games, mostly powered up anyhow, makes me feel like I've taken a better approach to my videos. As treating it like a standard review doesn't give me much to talk about, and isn't really all that much fun. My birthday is coming up next week, and I have some days off, so the next video should arrive on time. And then just one more to round out the month. If any interesting gaming news pops up, maybe I'll do a small video talking about it like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Seems like a few of you really like that. But, again, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like, and comment down below with your thoughts. Do you enjoy the original Mega Man at all? Or do you prefer Mega Man 2, or the rest of the series? Have you ever played Powered Up? Are you like me and desperate for an HD port? And if you're new to the channel, I'd love it if you subscribed. I'm FuzzySlippers, and I'll see you later. Peace.